Lots of folks are still scrambling. Big surprise there, right? But you get the sense they would not have it any other way. Now to a high-speed chase from Colwich into Wichita this afternoon. The suspect lucky she wasn't killed. Shots fired at a state trooper. Now 2 teenagers are in custody. But most of these folks, they are so hot about golf that they've been able to put the temperature out of their mind. In Crime Brief tonight, a police shooting in Great Bend ends with 1 man dead and an officer wounded. Folks here in Ulysses and throughout western Kansas very well aware of the major disaster that has hit them, and they are very grateful that the governor is here to see it firsthand. Also, mystery writer Carol Higgins Clark says she was just arriving home when she saw smoke billowing from the building, and she realized obviously this was not going to be any normal Wednesday. An update now on that tragic shooting out of Kansas City in which a man killed several of his own kids, and tonight the death toll has risen to 7 after yet another child loses his life.
I know you're diligently working just hard, pounding away at that computer.
How kind of you to say diligently.
Well, it's the only word I could come up with.
Stephanie, we've got something really amazing to show you. Check this out right behind me. This is a portion of that boat that split apart, as you mentioned, at about 9:30. It is down to the last minute for shoppers across Kansas, and as is the case every year, lots of folks are waiting until the last possible moment to buy those gifts. KSN's Josh Schwitzman is among the masses tonight. He is live at Best Buy West, where shoppers have been piling in all day long. Josh, how's it going out there? A busy night for Wichita fire crews as a house is engulfed by flames. They broke out just after 10 in the 1300 block of East Lincoln. Nobody was injured in the fire. No word yet on a cause or damage estimates. Well, it was a beautiful day for traveling today, both on the roads and in the skies. This was the scene at a very busy Mid-Continent airport this afternoon. Long lines of travelers waiting to get to their destinations. One couple telling us they were headed to Las Vegas in hopes of seeing the Shockers play in the holiday tournament tonight. A Winfield teacher is receiving some big-time recognition. Lynn Feltz was recently named not only Art Teacher of the Year for Kansas, but also the entire nation. Earlier this week, KSN's Ann Meyer visited her classroom. We also don't know who was piloting the aircraft, but we have learned that Corey Lytle was an avid pilot who got his license during last year's off-season. We should also add that Lytle's passport was found on the ground, and that's how he was identified.
Pretty interesting. You look at that building, obviously it had to be pretty well populated. Amazing that there's not more injuries or deaths even from there.
Absolutely, and we were hearing some pretty harrowing stories from residents there, some of whom are very famous, including photographer Richard Drutman. Now, he says he heard the very loud explosion. He looked out his windows and he saw what he believed were the wings falling to the ground, so you can just imagine what that was like, and he and his girlfriend quickly got out. Also, mystery writer Carol Higgins Clark says she was just arriving home when she saw smoke billowing from the building, and she realized obviously this was not going to be any normal Wednesday. Well, police describe it as a daring and gutsy crime. A burglar takes thousands of dollars from a Wichita Walmart. KSN's Shanda Brown looks at the case in tonight's Crime Stoppers Profile. A tough battle today for firefighters in Goddard. Flames tore through this house located on a wildlife preserve. Nobody was home at the time. The fire was so intense that at one point, a firefighter got separated from the rest of his crew inside the home. He was quickly found and was not injured. No word yet on a cause for those flames. Some big changes expected in the weather department. You guessed it, Old Man Winter looks to be making a return trip to Kansas. Andrew Kozak is tracking it for us over in the KSN Weather Lab. Good evening, Andrew. Yeah, it was pretty bad on Monday when I was up there. People were saying, hopefully it won't be this way throughout the entire week. And luckily, it looks like it did cool down pretty nicely.
Oh, it cooled down perfectly today. The sun came out, and what I kept hearing today over and over again is how beautiful of a course it was. The weather played perfectly in it. Everybody just really enjoyed the Kansas hospitality, and I think it's paid off with a wonderful, wonderful Senior Open. Yeah, before we took the air, NBC's commentators were just going on and on of what a beautiful course Prairie Dunes is and how they would like to see other events held at Prairie Dunes. So
that'd be great. Love to see that.
A great story for all of Kansas. Thanks a lot, Paul. We're getting a little too close to these flames. As you can see, the wind is really blowing them, so we're going to back off. The wind is really unpredictable out here, and this is what firefighters are up against. Absolutely, Nita. Exhausting, barely scratches the surface. In all, I was in the courtroom for about 6 hours. After the proceedings wrapped up for the day, I was so drained I felt as though I had run a 6-hour marathon. The testimony presented today, most of which came from Dennis Rader's 30-hour post-arrest confession, along with pictures of Rader himself and his victims. So very draining, so very frightening, and so very numbing, more so than anyone could have ever imagined.
He literally had hundreds of projects, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And he kept detailed records about his little projects, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
One by one, investigators who interviewed Dennis Rader following his arrest testified about the mind-boggling, chilling details that came right from BTK's mouth. The sentencing hearing unfolding in the same order as Rader's killing spree. BTK's first project, Little Mex, 4 members of the Otero family. Rader describing to investigators the terror that paralyzed 11-year-old Josephine Otero as she watched her mother take her last breaths.
She was crying out for her mother.
And again, there's been some testimony that when he talked about what Josie would say, would he mimic a little girl?
Yes, he would. He actually would change his voice to mimic the voice.
As if that wasn't enough to take away the breath of those in the courtroom, we then heard about how Rader planned to make sure Josie never spoke again.
So what did he call the killing of Josie? What was that going to be?
It was going to be his encore.
Right. So that was an encore. He's going to what? Do what to her?
He was going to hang her and probably masturbate.
As the hours passed, the details seemed to blend together. Each crime seemed so horrific, only the victim's name seemed to separate them. For much of the hearing, the man responsible for all of this sat stoically, taking it all in stride as he has in describing his terror. At times, he became animated, as if to say, I still possess some form of control. But we also learned that even Rader himself might have a sliver of an idea of just how sick he is, telling investigators at one point, I'm a monster. All right, back now to today's sentencing hearing. At times, Dennis Rader looked away and bowed his head when pictures of his victims were shown. However, we want to point out that was mixed in with smiles as he spoke to his attorneys. Also, at one point, Dennis Rader even breaking into a bit of a chuckle, and that came when one of the investigators admitted that authorities had lied to Dennis Rader at times during his confession in order for him to divulge more information. As for victims' relatives, we obviously saw a fair amount of tears, also a lot of deep breaths, but mostly they too sat in stunned silence because, again, this testimony was just so very numbing. Anita?
Well, and Anthony, I know you were in the courtroom as well back in June when Dennis Rader actually shocked everyone and detailed his crimes there. Can you compare today's mood to a few months ago?
Yeah, what a tough comparison. All in all, I would have to say that probably June 27th, a bit more stunning simply because we had no idea that Dennis Rader was going to talk so extensively about his crimes. And that, of course, was really the first time we had heard BTK speak at such length. But make no mistake about it, today was a very close second because we had heard so much graphic testimony, much more graphic testimony than from Rader himself back on June 27th. As a matter of fact, during one of the breaks, I told District Attorney Noah Folston, you were sure right when you said that Dennis Rader had barely scratched the surface in detailing his crimes back when he pled guilty. That was a particularly touching moment at the end of the session, I thought, when Prosecutor Kevin O'Connor stood up as we were all getting ready to leave. But you better believe that he wanted to make a statement, and what he said was this: it's time to stop talking about Dennis Rader. These people, pointing to the victims' relatives, are my heroes. This is the reason I do this job. Very touching moment, and he received a standing ovation for making that statement.